You are watching What Woke You Up? I'm James Bennett. Thanks very much for watching. Well, I'm very excited because today I have an internationally known, very gifted man by the name of Andy Porter, who is bills himself as a psychic surgeon. And based on the input that I've had from people that I know that have used him, and it is very much so. He has a wonderful website, and I'm just so looking forward to having him here today. And actually, I think I'm going to want to take courses from the Spiritual Release Academy, which he is head of. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Andy Porter.
Yeah, hi James. Well, thanks for the introduction. That was very kind of you, and I'm as excited to meet you as you are to meet me. So it's kind of good to see everything's reciprocal, as it tends to be really in the kind of spiritual realm. So thank
Mm,
you for inviting me on.
thank you so much for that. Well, I have so many questions. Let me see. Well, the first one, how did you come about? Were you contacted by I don't know, you tell me, a member of our Galactic Federation? I know we have a lot of help, especially at this time. Or is it something that you discovered on your own and then the help came? How did this gift come about?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess gift or curse is the question really.
Yes.
So I think from my perspective, my kind of short bio really is that I was considered myself to be quite normal 20 years ago. So I was never into spiritual things, was never into religion, was never into anything really in this kind of field at all. So I was just a normal guy doing a normal job. And then I went through a quite turbulent divorce, two young children at the time. So they were sort of 3 and 5. And things were difficult for quite a while. And then when I found myself living on my own, I kind of met my wife, now Jane. We've been together like 20 years. But when I first met Jane, that was the kind of start of my spiritual path, really. So our energetic meeting was the kind of the kickstart to push me onto a spiritual path. But it kind of happened in a pretty negative way. So I started to hear voices and see things. I started to see shadows moving around the new house that I bought. I started to hear things at night. Kind of got to the point where things were so bad I couldn't sleep. I was sleeping the light on, that type of thing. And then moving forward from there, things kind of started to climb into bed with me, which kind of sounds really funny when you frame it in this conversation. But of course, if those things are negative and they're touching you in places that you don't really want to be touched in the middle of the night by negative things, it's not the best of experiences generally. So I kind of had this kind of like really shocking introduction to spirit effectively. And I didn't know where to go for help, James, to be honest, because 20 years ago, the internet wasn't as it is now, where you can just go to Google and find things. So you kind of had to know people, and the internet was sort of in its infancy, and there weren't many websites of many mediums and psychics. So I felt like I was sort of stranded, having these really bizarre experiences I couldn't really talk to anyone about. My friends used to laugh when I told them, and they'd say, if they were being touched at night by things you couldn't see, they'd be happy, and we used to make a bit of a joke about it. And of course, a lot of them came over to stay with me over weekends in this house because they thought it was really funny. And generally, nothing happened. So they'd stay the night, nothing would happen. And then, as soon as they disappeared, I get goosebumps. I start to see shadows. I start to hear things. Start to see odd imagery in my mind's eye again, and everything kind of just got worse. So eventually, Jane, my wife now, worked in a hairdressing salon, and one of the ladies that came in was a psychic, a spiritual medium. So Jane sort of highlighted and framed my experience really. And this lady said, "Oh, he's just having psychic attack. There's obviously spiritual entities in the house. They need to be cleared and they need to go, and then he'll be fine." So we were both like, "Wow, okay, so what do we need to do?" So I obviously paid her for an appointment. She did a remote spiritual clearing on the house. And, as she said, within probably an hour, everything changed. No more shadows, no more kind of
Wow.
hearing voices. So literally, I was kind of shocked because I thought she didn't even come to the house. She was 3 hours away from a physical perspective. But that didn't really last. So it only lasted for a few days to a week, probably. And then
Yes,
I
I
came
want
in
to
from
ask you
work.
about that. Yes.
And then, of course, everything starts again, but it was kind of worse. So it was almost like I kind of, put the put the kind of wood into the hornet's nest and moved it around, and the hornets basically disappeared out. And it was kind of full on problems then. Every moment I was in the house, there were things happening really. So it kind of got worse. So eventually I kind of ended up finding a guy called Brian, basically, that was a psychic surgeon, funnily enough. I contacted him. He lived quite locally to me, so I went to see him, had a lot of appointments with him, and we kind of worked through learning, or he was teaching me protection. He was clearing the house and clearing the space. And he said, look, this seems to be something that's going to kind of follow you. The problem isn't the house, it's you. And I kind of assumed it was the house because it was a brand new
That's
house.
what I meant to ask you. Was the attachment associated more with you or with the house?
Yeah, it was me, basically. I mean, I
Mm,
thought it was the house because the problems happened in the house, but obviously it was connecting to me effectively.
mm,
And there were lots, there was this continual attack all of the time. I was in this house. It was, just weird things all night long.
mm.
Heating would come on its own, so the radiators would get really hot. And then when I came to, I'd be lying in bed sweating, walked to the controller was off. So I couldn't turn the heating off because it wasn't on, but the radiators were red hot. And there was all these kind of bizarre things. And of course, when you start telling people, everyone assumes that you've kind of lost the plot, really. And that's
Lost the
that.
plot.
And I kind of thought I had as well. There was definitely times I thought I'd kind of lost the plot too, really. And of course, I was trying to hold down a professional job. I worked in a big corporation, big company as an IT architect. And I was trying to go to work every day and do my normal job whilst not sleeping all night and having all of these kind of bizarre spiritual experiences.
Mm.
So, so to cut a long story short, effectively, I ended up selling the house because I thought it's just not going to work for me there.
Was that a
And
disclosure in UK? Do they have to sign a disclosure to that effect in the paperwork?
I don't think you do. I mean, the funny thing is the people that moved in after me are still living there now. So they've been there like 20 years. So obviously as you said, they weren't empathic or sensitive to spirits, so it doesn't seem to have affected them. But of course, the problem was me, actually. It wasn't really the house per se. These entities were actually attacking me. That was the kind of problem.
Okay, so that leads to my next question. So your vulnerability can be associated with, and I'm going to list a few things and I want to know if you concur, but it can be associated with your being open because you're an empath,
Yeah, I guess
or
that
your
was
ability to perceive anyway.
yeah, I mean, I'd never had any spiritual experiences. I wasn't a medium. I didn't talk to spirit. I didn't really have anything that would be considered to be gifted or spiritual at all. I never have had that all through my life. But obviously, meeting Jane was the catalyst for me to kind of turn on. And then I started to have some really weird experiences. I'd be walking down the road and I'd see entities pop up behind people and they just stare at me. And then I'd look again and they'd be gone. And I started to see these negative entities connected to certain people. And
Mm.
some of the places we went to, Jen and I went to, she lived in quite a kind of remote place in the UK, sort of down by Devon area. So again, it's very remote. There's not many big kind of cities and things down there at all. It's middle of the country, middle of nowhere. So we go to a few of these gatherings of people, and I'd see these entities popping up behind, quite often men primarily, that were all part of groups of things. But these entities would like show themselves and just stare at me, and I'd kind of do a double take, and then they'd appear to go, and I'd look again, and then they'd just pop up again. It was almost as though they could see me and realize that I could see them. And of course, I didn't know what to do. So I just kind of, just kind of looked the other way and just assumed that whatever was happening to me would eventually stop and I could kind of go back to my normal life, which never happened.
And I'm thankful that it didn't. You know, so you would say that you're inherently, it got greatly amplified, but you're inherently an empath, but it was
I,
much more amplified in later years.
yeah, basically. I mean, I think basically, obviously, the meeting when Jane and I met energetically, that was the starting point. And she was the same. Jane was never into mediumship and she wasn't psychic and she wasn't into spirituality at all. And again, as soon as we met, things started to happen to me first. And then she got to the point that she started to hear things too in the house that I was in. And of course, we both went to sort of meditation groups and crystal healing groups and Reiki. And we both ended up being able to talk to our spirit guides and kind of work with spirit. So Jane is kind of the same as me, just that she doesn't really use it and doesn't really kind of walk that path. But effectively, we both were the catalyst for each other, I guess, if you look at it that way.
And what was the segue into your starting to work with Chen? And is Chen part of our, what would you say, Galactic Federation, the light
Yeah,
beings that were helping us at this time?
yeah. I guess Chen doesn't give too much away about who he's with, particularly. He doesn't give too much away about who he actually is either, to be perfectly honest. He always comes, his narrative is that he's just a kind of, a discarnate spirit that had an unearthed life on the UK and China, didn't live for very long. But obviously, he has this skill set that isn't normal for someone that was a discarnate spirit that just farmed the crops in China. So he's alluded to the fact that he's obviously part of a big group of entities, and there's a lot of power with this group. Obviously we clear people every day, lots of people, and space clear and property clear. So it's kind of obvious that Chen isn't kind of what he alludes to be. But on the other side of the coin, he's always said to me, I don't want to be an entity that people look up to. I want to be anonymous effectively and just do the work. So just be kind of gold and valued for the work that's done rather than for the name that you carry. So there's lots of people that have said to me, could Chen be this and could Chen be that? And I always kind of laugh and say, well, you know, he's not what he claims to be. Obviously, he did have an earth life and he was a farmer in China back in the 1600s. But effectively, since then, obviously, what we're dealing with now is, a much more powerful entity that is here to work with humanity and to help to raise the vibration of the planet effectively.
I think we have a lot of that, more, perhaps more than ever before at this time. So, how did he first present himself uh, to you? And there is no visual associated, I assume. How did he
Oh,
first
but
present himself to you?
yeah, so when I was doing like a crystal healing course, and when I was doing this crystal healing course, I was learning about crystals, and every time I picked a crystal up, I started to have visions. So the crystals would show me mines that they came from. I'd see a mine and a crystal being mined, people actually banging them out of the rock and things. So I started to become very attuned to energy effectively in that way. And then I started to do a Reiki course. So I was hands-on healing. I wanted to do that. So I started to do Reiki. And as I finished the Reiki Master course, the kind of third version of that, the lady that ran the course said to me, I've just done the attunement, which is the end of Reiki training effectively. And there's a Chinese gentleman come forward. He's calling himself Chen. So he's very short with a beard and a kind of big ponytail thing. And he's saying that he'll be working with you as a psychic surgeon for the rest of your life. And of course, I just laughed because I just assumed that, this was just completely crazy, really. And I couldn't see or hear this spirit. And I just assumed that, Anne, I didn't know what was going on at the time. I just drove home and Jane said to me, how did you get on tonight? Because that was my last Reiki session. I said, yep, really good. I've got my certificate. I can do stuff now as a Reiki master. And I said, and I got introduced to this spirit guide called Chen, this Chinese guy who's going to work with me as a psychic surgeon. And of course, Jane rolled around the floor laughing as well and said, well, we won't think too much about that. And we didn't really think about it for probably quite a few months because it just, nothing happened. And then I started to go to meditation practice. I was doing meditation anyway. And then in meditation, every time I did meditation, Chen would come forward. So I'd start to see this Chinese guy, and his face would come up, and he'd start to talk to me in the guided, visualized meditation. And he
Hmm.
was saying, I'm Chen, I'm going to be your spirit, I am your spirit guide. We're going to work together. You need to start to learn trance so that I can come in and take over your body. And of course, I thought at the time there's no way that I'm going to be allowing another spirit to kind of take
Trance.
over.
So this term could be kind of interchangeable with your ability to channel.
Yeah, I mean, basically spirit possession, really, but in a positive way. So if you
Mhm.
think about, another spirit possessing the body, that's kind of what trance is really, whereby as a sort of medium, you allow another. discarnate entity to take over your physical body and speak through you and work through your hands.
Mm,
So, of course, I had lots of clients coming to me because I started to get really good results from a kind of healing perspective. So,
mm,
lots of people came to see me. I had a shed in the bottom of the garden. And then what started to happen was as soon as I put my hands on people, I would lose consciousness. Chen would literally take over. And then when I came back, like an hour later, they talk about the fact that they felt hands inside their body, inside their stomach, and they'd feel things being taken out of their stomach. And of course,
mm,
I realized this was psychic surgery. This was what he talked about that he was going to do.
mm,
And we had some big long conversations about it. And he just said, well, this is the agreement that we have between us. You're providing the physical kind of vehicle. I will be coming in and taking over and removing this layer of negativity. So his version or the wording for psychic surgery from his perspective is it's surgery on the etheric field. So not on the physical body, but on the etheric field. And then when you take things out and remove things from the etheric, that changes the physical because, of course, the physical is a mirror copy of the etheric vibration, basically. So I kind of started to understand what he was talking about and what we were doing together. And then as time went by, I was doing this trance meditation course. And then one day I turned up. Chen literally took over, stood up, started to walk around the room. He was talking to everybody. He was shaking people's hands. I had no recollection of anything that happened. And everyone sat in the room was just gobsmacked when I came back and opened my eyes. And they were just like, wow, we've just met Chen. He's been in, he's talked to everybody, he's walked about. And of course, I had no recollection of what had happened at all. So that was the kind of meeting or the start point, I guess, from a kind of conscious perspective of doing this work in this way.
So much better to do surgery that way. You don't have all the mess and the blood and everything.
Yeah, and that was the thing, really, James. Obviously, we started to work on people and do work, and the results were very good, and then that attracts more people because, of course, but most people have never heard of psychic surgery, and most people would always think of psychic surgery in the old world, where you had someone with a scalpel that would stick it in your eye and kind of, take things out and throw things in a bin with kind of blood and gore. But obviously, the modern version of psychic surgery is surgery on the etheric field by these discarnate spirits. So there is nothing to see, but the people that are actually having the surgery will tell you what they feel, and they can feel things happening. But of course, there's no pain because you get given a spiritual anesthetic before they start. So when someone's lying on the bed, I put my hands on. As soon as I put my hands on, they can feel their whole body go dead. They can still feel their legs and arms, but they couldn't move it. So if you kind of shouted fire and ran out of the room, they would be left on the bed unable to move because they can't move their body at all. In the
Mm,
same way that a kind of physical anesthetic does the same thing.
mm,
Obviously, anesthetizes the physical body. So
mm,
then started to kind of do that work. And then the sort of people started to be attracted to me were people that were schizophrenic, having intrusive thoughts,
mm,
suicidal, self-harming, that kind of thing. And then Chen announced that we were going to be clearing and removing possessed entities from people.
mm,
And of course, I wasn't really understanding exactly what he meant, particularly.
mm.
I kind of got to grips with it pretty quickly because people would come in the room, they start shouting, spitting, and they were possessed by negative entities, basically.
Mm.
Kind of get them up on the couch really quickly, put my hands on. Jen would come in. He'd then generally talk to some demonic entity and basically tell them they were going to leave by their own accord. And then he'd kind of basically force that energy out of their field. And of
Mm,
course, when they woke up and came to, the thoughts had gone, the signs of possession had gone. I
mm.
generally had no idea what had happened. So I used to record some of these sessions so that I could actually see what was going on. So it was all happening very quickly for me, but not in a very controlled way.
Let me make a statement in my effort to dip my toes into the waters that you swim in every day, and you tell me if you concur. My glib look at it feels like this. Either through abuse, depression, drugs, alcohol, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all manner of abuse, alcoholism, self-disdain, it is as though if you don't have a level of havingness with your vessel. If you, these are ways that, or your hunting cat, your cabin in the woods, if you will. These are ways that the door can be left open.
Yeah, I think that frames exactly what I experienced, really. Most of our clients, and most people have been through trauma, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual. They've had some trauma in their life that effectively, as you say, is the catalyst and the source of the problems. They then generally turn to substance to kind of self-medicate effectively, or they obviously take substances to try and control depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, intrusive thoughts, that kind of thing. But at that point, of course, from our perspective, the way that we see things is we see that the etheric field that protects us from other spiritual energies has been perforated and broken by substance or trauma or PTSD, that type of thing. So that
Yes,
person
yes,
has kind of perforations in their kind of bubble that's around them. And then
yes,
these
yes.
negative energies and discarnate spirits can then come in and connect. And of course, that's when they start to control the dream state. So people start to have terrifying dreams, start to change the emotional state, start to change the things that people hear, the things that they say, and the things that they perceive is completely manipulated by these negative entities and other discarnate spirit as well. And of course, that's why people that have these problems they're living in a completely different reality, really, because that reality is being controlled by these external entities that exist.
They're opportunists, aren't they?
Yeah, so parasites, I mean, basically, we just see them as
They're
parasites. But then,
parasites of our life force.
yeah, exactly. And of course, that's what they do. They steal the life force. So they connect to someone's field. And, I mean, I remember talking to Chen about it years ago, and I said to him, why would they do that to us? And Chen just laughed and said, well, you do the same to animals yourself, don't you? Because you have cows that you milk, you take their milk, you make products from it, you send it to supermarkets all over the country, and you as humans ingest, cow energy, cow products. So these entities live in this low vibration, this low frequency, and that's where they exist. And they need to assimilate low frequency. And of course, low frequency vibration is emotional fear generally or anger. So all of the negative emotions that we as humans experience, they need that to assimilate that into themselves in the same way that we need food to keep ourselves alive. So they're just doing what they do. It's just that their impact on us as humans is obviously quite terrifyingly bad.
But they don't create, do they? They supplant and subvert your energy.
Yeah, they don't create anything. They just
Yes.
basically they're like parasite. I mean, again, my kind of version of them is kind of like a flea on a dog, really. The dog doesn't really know the flea's there, but the fleas are basically assimilating the dog's blood. And if lots of fleas appear on a dog, then eventually the dog becomes ill and fatigued and tired because obviously the life force is being sucked out. And when we look at a lot of these conditions like CFS, probably fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis. There's lots of energetic diseases, not to say that they're all spiritual problems, but certainly some of them disappear when we do SRT clearings. So, from our perspective, we know that a percentage of people that are experiencing these types of fatigue and problems is coming from a spiritual source.
And what I wanted to touch on that you were speaking of a couple of minutes ago is SRA, satanic ritual abuse, is done by the dark ones to purposely open the door. Wouldn't you concur?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many of our clients, we have a lot of clients, obviously. A lot of them are quite famous people, that have been through some type of occult ritual practice, satanic practice, paedophilia when they were younger as children. And of course,
Okay.
when they go through those types of horrifying experiences, that obviously does open the door for these entities to come in and connect. And then, of course, they stay connected for most of their life. When we look at we look at the kind of top echelon of society, we're all aware that there is this nefarious activities that they all seem to be involved in, and they all seem to be doing, and it kind of permeates, our media, the film industry, Hollywood, most of the big corporations. So again, this level of negativity and this level of negative entity control seems to be there continually, really, in this top layer primarily.
It seems that when people start to get some fame, they are approached by the dark ones, by this cabal. Would you concur?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of secret societies that we probably could name that, we know, they're aligned with the negative side. I mean, I know
Yes.
people in some of these secret societies and they have no idea what they've really joined because
Yes.
they're on the lower levels. They assume it's because they get work and they're part of a kind of brotherhood and they kind of see the positive sides, I guess. But what they don't seem to realize is that behind the scenes, these secret societies are being run by negative entities that
Yes.
control, the financial system, politics, everything seems to be controlled and connected to this kind of cabal of negativity, really.
I feel that this chapter is coming to an end. Would you agree?
I think we're in a spiritual war, basically, James. That's my kind of. I've taken a few
Yeah.
years now to
Yeah.
come to the conclusion
Oh
that
yeah.
what we're doing is we're in the trenches on the coalface trying to clear these negative entities from the planet. And this is what Chen will tell you, in his version of things. When I say to Chen, what are you actually here to do? What is your kind of role and job? He always says, I'm here to help the planet raise in vibration. And the way we do that is we clear this level of negativity from individual people.
Mm,
And as
mm,
we clear people, their vibration comes up, only a tiny amount. But the more people we clear, the more their vibration comes up and the more effect it has on their families and their loved ones. And then, of
mm.
course, the planet's vibration starts to ascend very slowly too. And when we get to a point that the vibration of the planet is high enough, this negative layer can't exist here anymore. So,
Yes.
so this is what I kind of see happening. This is why they continually create fear and obviously war, because they need everyone to be in a fearful state that, we're going to have a nuclear war, World War
Right
Three,
on.
everyone's going to die tomorrow. They need everyone to be in this fearful state because as soon as we start to change our thought process and change our vibration, then of course that puts them in a very difficult position because it means that they can't stay. And this is the spiritual war that I kind of see and obviously work with every day, basically.
Well, as such, and this brand of spiritual warfare might be a good time to fortify our spirit, huh?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
I was going to touch on two quick things, and then I was hoping that maybe you would do a reading on me.
Yeah, we can do that. I can certainly scan you from that perspective and give you the feedback as to
Two
what
things. Thank you for
does.
that. Thank you for that. Forgive me. I am preoccupied on my little platform uh, with the overriding divine law of our plane, that being free will. And I'm very fascinated with how the dark ones kind of troll and mock and pervert free will. That subject holds a lot of my interest at this time. What would you say about that?
Yeah, it's kind of what we work on. So the way that we work, obviously, we talk about it as sovereignty, basically. So from my perspective, spiritual sovereignty, meaning that you're an individual entity in yourself, you should be a sovereign individual, meaning that your energy is just your own. There is nothing connected to you or changing or manipulating your energetic structure, your thought process, that type of thing. So when we kind of do clearings on people, we're checking people's sovereignty. So free will
Mm.
sovereignty being the same sort of thing. So the
Mhm.
way that I see things, James, is that generally, most people give away their free will. So when they're taking hallucinogenic drugs or they're taking
That,
alcohol or they're drunk or
yes,
something, these
yes.
entities approach them in that state and ask for permission to connect. But the entities don't actually present themselves in the way they normally look. They present as Jesus Christ or Mary Magdalene or some other deity. And of course, someone that's taking hallucinogenic drugs thinks, oh, great, Jesus has come to talk to me and would like permission to connect to me. So, of course, they say, yeah, cool. So these entities have permission from that person to connect with them. And then, of course, they basically use nefarious manipulation to kind of change the way they think and obviously suck their energy. And this was one of the ways that Chen worked around that. So when he would approach an entity and say, you're connected to the client, basically, and the entity would say, yeah, yeah, but I'm respecting free will. I respect universal law because that person gave their permission for me to be with them and to possess them, basically. So this is what the entities would say to Chen. And of course, as we were working through our kind of
Mm.
protocol with Dr. Palmer, Chen said, yeah, but hang on a minute. What you did was untruthful because you presented as a positive energy like Jesus Christ or Mary Magdalene, but you're a reptilian, Draco negative entity. So even though you may have been given permission by the client, you weren't presenting as what you are. And therefore, we can redact that contract because it is a contract effectively. And that's the way that Chen now redacts all of these contracts with people and removes the entities that are connected to them. So even though that person may have given permission, they did so in a kind of subversive way, and the spirit team that we're working with can redact these contracts because they're not fulfilled from a kind of universal law and a free will perspective.
Oh, just beyond interesting to me, Andy. Just beyond interesting. The other question that I have is, I've spent a couple of hundred hours or more on this bioweapon they call the vaccine. And as you know, it is about losing our connection with source. How would you, what is your assessment of your work as it pertains to people that have especially had the second and the third jab? And how does that muddy the spiritual waters in terms of your work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's different kind of views on the whole jab thing, really. I think partly, my perception is obviously the way that I tend to understand and see things, certainly, is it was more about kind of killing the physical. So people that have taken the jab, we don't know what's in the jab, but we kind of know now that we've got graphene oxide and all sorts of other things in there, things that kind of react with 5G
Yes.
radiation. So when I asked Chen, what is this about? He said it's not really about the spiritual stuff. It's more about stopping the physical body working, really. And this, I guess, is why we started to see so many people that had strokes and heart attacks and have got problems with, heart inflammation and myocarditis. And, both my parents had the jab, even though we kind of advised them they probably shouldn't. And sort of dad passed 3 months after. He did have cancer, but he was stable. But he kind of ended up with turbo cancer very quickly and passed quickly. And my mum was the kind of fittest person that I knew, fitter than me actually. She would walk miles and she was pretty happy. But 2 to 3 weeks after she had her vaccine, first one, she was having strokes. She went deaf overnight. We were in and out of the hospital week by week. And then fast forward like a year and a half later, she passed with kidney failure. So, and I spoke to the doctor, my medical doctor at the time, because we were talking about the death certificate. And I said, well, you can put COVID vaccine on there. That's what she died from. And he said, no, I can't do that. We don't have the option to do that. I said, no, but
Oh,
that's what she died from. He said, no, no, she didn't. She died from kidney failure. I said, yeah, but caused by the COVID vaccine. And do you know what he said? He said to me, I could never say it on the air, but you are right. He said, this is actually the problem, but the way the system is kind of being designed, we're not allowed to. We don't have an option to tick a box that says vaccine. So basically, it goes down as pneumonia, or my mum's case, kidney failure. So I just laughed and said to him, in that case, if you're going to lie about it, you can put whatever you like on the death certificate. I don't actually care because we're not going to actually put the truth in. Just pick what you want. Asteroid landed on her
another
head.
another captured operation. All of our institutions seem to be captured operations.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of understand. He's doing his job. He's a doctor. He can only work within the confines of the ways that he works. But I obviously saw the very inside view of that. So for me,
As
it
did
was
many.
very clear that this was a kind of reduction of population control event. Really, I
Yes,
think
yes,
obviously works quite well. To be fair.
yes. Well, if you're of a mind to, how do you feel about doing a reading on me?
Yeah, we can do that. How do you want me to do that? Do you want me to, in terms of scanning you, or do you want to? How are you sort of thinking of doing that?
Oh, do maybe spiritually, if I have benevolent or malevolent attachment, and perhaps health, however you feel so inclined, Andy.
Yeah, that's cool. I was only going to suggest that I could get Chen to come in and talk to you direct, which kind of takes me out of the loop, which is also a good thing if you fancy doing that.
Let me think. Yeah,
Yeah, so we can do that. So what I'll do is I'll just take my watch off for a moment. So we'll just get Chen in for just,
take your watch off.
yeah, he's got a thing about my watch basically. So
So
it's all about
many.
balance in energy and things. Whenever I've got a
Yes,
watch on, he doesn't like me to channel or let him come in and take over when I've got a watch on one hand. Even though it's only like a kind of, it's not a fantastic watch. It's just my kind of
yes.
normal
No,
digital watch.
I can see that. Yes.
But so we don't do watches. So I've got other things on the other hand in terms of tiger's eye and Shundai and that kind of stuff. But what the watch he doesn't like.
Yes.
So we clear that. Okay, so what I'm going to do then, James, I'm just going to basically shut my eyes, just kind of do a quick meditation for seconds, hand over to Chen. He'll come in and then you can talk to him direct, which will probably be a more interesting conversation than talking to me.
I can only imagine.
Cool. Okay. And then basically, so when you're ready to kind of finish, obviously you're going to run the session, then you can kind of close that down and I'll obviously he'll let me know and I'll come back.
You're more likely to run out of time than losing my interest, Andy. You
Yeah, I
go
can
right
imagine that
ahead.
actually. And Jen can talk for hours on end as well. So, we could still
Mm,
be here like 4 days' time or something.
mm.
Cool. Okay, James, I'll hand you over to Chen and we'll go from there. Good day to you.
And to you.
Yes, I'm very excited to meet your acquaintance.
And I you.
Yeah, so thank you for the invite to be able to come forward and obviously speak through young Andrew with this particular method. And obviously, you and I are on the same side, so to speak. So we have lots of things that we could discuss together, which would be of much interest to many of the audience.
Hmm. Well, then, how would you define this unique time that we find ourselves in on this plane right now?
Yes, well, this is a fascinating time in human history. It's a pinnacle to a certain degree, and obviously a time of great change. But if you think about human history and the timelines, there are many things that have happened before that have happened in very similar ways, and there's always strife and there is always change, and it's part of the human condition to dominate other people, and of course, it's part of the human condition to evolve and to move forward. As young Andrew and yourself have discussed earlier, of course, the big problem on this planet is that this planet has always been run by a level of subversive negativity, so negative entities that have been here long before humans ever incarnated on this planet own and do run the planet, just they do that from a different vibratory frequency. And therefore, you as humans don't have a window to be able to see these types of entities, but of course they exist. And they exist on the sculptures, on the scriptures, in your pyramids, they exist in your history. You can find their footprints on the planet. So they are very much part of your everyday culture. It's just that they're very good at keeping themselves under the radar, should we say.
Hmm. And how would you describe the direction that humanity is moving to uh, at this time?
Well, humanity is, if we think about humanity as a conscious energy, really, all of you human beings have a conscious vibration, a conscious thought process, and you're all connected to each other because, of course, you're connected. Much like the internet connects computers together, each computer is autonomous in itself, makes its own decisions, and each person working on their particular personal computer are doing their own things. But all computers are connected because they use the fabric of a network to connect each other and to pull and send information. And humans work exactly the same. It's just that you can't see your vibratory frequencies. So when you have a thought, your thought effectively goes out on a network. And that network is a transmission network. And of course, other energies and entities can see the things that you're thinking and can obviously interact with you in different ways. So effectively, you're quite blinded as a species to a certain degree, and there are lots of other interdimensional frequencies that exist where we have all of these other energies and entities. And that means, of course, that there's always going to be a polarity. So there's always going to be a positive aspect, and therefore there's always a negative aspect. And at the moment, the negative aspect has been in control of this planet really for most of humanity. If you look back through your history, back to the times of Romans and before, there's always been an overriding level of control by a very small number of people. And this is the same today, except today people are waking up. more people are interconnected, more people are starting to understand the way that the social system works. And the finance system is ultimately a control system that's designed to keep people, again, subjugated and in control. So there's lots of change that's happening at the moment. And obviously, we are at the forefront really of that change because we're here to change the vibration, to raise the vibration, and to try to remove this level of negative control that has permeated humanity for most of its time.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Would you say that the notion of time and the notion of good and bad and right and wrong are both lies that we kind of go along with to in the parameters of this game and creating a forum from which us that we learn from?
Yes, I think that's a very good way to explain it, really, because of course everything when you look at a war and then you read about a war in the future, the people that win the war write the narration of what happened. The people that lose the war don't have a voice. So, of course, as you look at history in the timeline, everything can be changed by the people that control effectively. And of course,
Mhm.
it's the control system that always writes the book to a certain degree. And this is the big problem is that the schooling system the way that you teach your children, children are taught to be programmed to follow and to just repeat. And of course, this is what you see in every school, just about everywhere in the world. The children aren't allowed to think for themselves. They're taught to do certain things and they're expected to produce answers and they're given tests where they have to remember things. But there's no concept of actually delving into the real information and defining the outcome based upon the reality. It's just repeat what you've been told. And then, of course, the repeaters become teachers for the next generation.
Mm. Would you care to comment on what the rest of this year is going to look like and how
Yes,
the, yes.
I think from our perspective, there's lots of change. There's lots of things changing, but I think things are going to become quite interesting because obviously, from our perspective, we see different timelines. So it can be quite difficult to put a stake in the sand and say exactly what's likely to happen. But if we look at what's actually happening from a spiritual perspective, obviously the finance system has finished itself in most Western countries to a certain degree, because of course all Western countries are broke on paper, so
There's that. Yeah.
they don't have any wealth. And of course, if a country has no energetic and spiritual wealth, then it has no money. So it's a fabrication that the people are still living within. So the finance system is the first thing that I would say is likely to have to change and probably implode. And then we have this negative aspect that's been at war with the positive aspect. So you're seeing this playing out in your politics. And of course, there is always a level. Politicians are never what they seem to be, even though they may say the right things, they generally don't do the right things. So there's lots of political theatre going on, I guess, on a world stage. But ultimately, the forces of negativity obviously would like to create more negativity. So they would like to create more war because, of course, war for most countries is the way that most people are employed. So if you look at most countries and look at the corporations with the most money are either based in finance and banking or they're based in war. So they create war machines, they create planes and tanks, etc. So therefore, you have to have war to continue the progression to make the things that employ people. But what's happening now, of course, is there's a level of artificial intelligence, AI, that's starting to come to life. And if you think about AI, where did AI come from? 2 years ago, you and I would have probably not even known the word AI, but suddenly we've got AI everywhere. Every single person is using AI to communicate, to write their books, to do their things. So this AI, if you look at things like mobile phones, they took years and years to develop, and they were incrementally small developments. But AI seems to have exploded out of nowhere, and it's now taking over the planet. So we can work on the assumption that there is a negative agenda behind this type of technology, because otherwise, if humans were developing the technology, it would have happened slowly over time, whereas this has suddenly appeared. So I think that probably frames that part of the conversation, I would say.
So would you say that The one we're calling Donald Trump is a good thing for our freedoms and our sovereignty and our well-being at this time.
Yes, I think there are certain attributes. Most politicians have an aspiration to be to be written into history. So I would say that particular individual that you speak of has an aspiration to be part of history, and there are certain things that he is doing and he's planning to do that would be perceived to be good for most people. But of course, there's always an agenda behind everyone and everything to a certain degree. And it's the agenda behind the scenes that becomes of interest, because of course, that's the part that most people don't get to see. So, what we have really from a world stage perspective, from my perspective, really, is you have two world leaders, Mr. Putin and obviously Mr. Trump, that are engaged in dialogue between each other, and effectively, of course, they're both world leaders, they're both running their countries, they both want to be written into the history books to be these great leaders of these big countries. And of course, there's certain things they can do that would be perceived to be positive. And obviously, stopping things like World War is the big one, really. The problem, of course, is behind the scenes, we have this negative layer, these negative entities that exist outside of your frequency band so that you can't see them. And they are more than happy to live on a radioactive planet. So they can exist on your planet if it becomes radioactive. Whereas, of course, humans cannot. And this is what's happening now from our perspective is that we have this push-pull happening whereby some of the countries want to go to war because they're being run by this negative agenda. And the other countries, Russia and America being two, don't wish to go to war because they realize that would fulfill a very negative agenda for these entities that are controlling things from behind the scenes. So there's lots of things playing out, and of course, there's lots of change, and there's lots of theatre, which of course is the case. Most people never know what's really happening because, of course, very influential politicians never really give their hand away, that the deals are done behind closed doors. It's just the camera and the media present the theatrics.
Although it may seem, I have some reservation, it may seem ancillary for some reason to the conversation. What would you say about what millions call the Q operation? Perhaps a kind of intelligence disclosure sting operation to deal with the dark ones that have been, you know, driving our bus politically and financially for so many hundreds of years.
Yes, I think that's quite a good way to engage in that conversation. There are lots of individuals in influential positions that are working for the positive agenda, that don't show their hand, that are kept behind closed doors in the background, but they do release information and they are here working from a positive perspective. And of course, there are many humans that appear in human form that are actually entities vibrating at a different frequency inside. So there are many humans walking the planet that are actually negative entities in one way, but there are many humans walking the planet that are extraterrestrial entities, but positive ones as well. So not everything is as it seems, and lots of these different entity beings hold very powerful positions in powerful places in companies, corporations, and governments. So again, if you think about this being a theatre show, people take their positions and their places, and the curtains go back, and then they move into role and they act in that way. So there's an equally biased game that's happening, really. Spiritual warfare, I think, is the best terminology, really, from that perspective.
Would you say that what's going on our plane here is that we're all hybrids, and that what defines this experiment here is how we're all going to get on?
Yes, I would say that it defines it exactly. There isn't really a human being because, of course, if you look at a human being, if you work on the assumption, so well, I used to have this conversation with young Andrew quite some time ago, and we used to laugh to each other, and he was talking about, the concepts of humans and how they've evolved over the years. And I said, well, you couldn't have evolved, could you? Because if you started off as a monkey and you've evolved into a human with no hair, basically, why would you still have monkeys on the planet? Because they would have all evolved at the same time into humans. So that whole narrative doesn't actually work at all, really. So you'd have to work on the assumption that then human beings are biological and chemical based energies and entities that have been developed somewhere, somehow, placed on the planet, and obviously locked into a loaded frequency of vibration. So that would be the way that we would see. So as you say, a hybrid is exactly what a human is. Lots of different energies spliced into the genetics and the DNA to create a human being that has more intellect than a monkey. It has more intellect than most other animals on the planet.
From what I've gathered, is it true that us humans are generally very highly revered, even though we don't consider ourselves as evolved as other beings? And if so, what is unique about this plane and us humans?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. So humans are revered, as you say, from a galactic perspective because most other species have evolved. So most other species and entities from different planets, such as the Pleiades, Sirius, all sorts of other planets, have evolved over thousands and thousands of years. And of course, their species have certain traits. But the human is almost like the biological energy and entity that's still developing. It still has emotions, it still can make decisions, but it's very emotional, trigger and based. Most other species and most other entities don't have any emotional triggers at all. They work from a conscious perspective, they make logical decisions. So, rather like the AI that we talked about earlier, a programmed AI will make a decision based upon a number of choices. So we'll look at something. It doesn't make a decision based upon emotional state or anything else. It's purely give it the problem. It will look at the problem, analyze the problem, and then make a collective decision. And that decision will be correct from its perspective every time. So the same AI will make the same decision time and time again. A human, if you give it the same problem on a daily basis, depending upon the emotional state they're in, will make different decisions. And this is what makes you a very unique species because you're quite difficult to control because of the emotional inputs and the emotional reflex that you have.
Mm. Is love and empathy a bit unique to our species? And if so, does that endear us to benevolent light beings that are looking over the proceedings here?
Yes, that's exactly how things are. So the human being, when they move or when you move into a state of love, your heart chakra opens and you basically vibrate at a very high frequency. It changes your frequency of vibration enormously. And of course, that frequency is something very unique for most species. And this, of course, is why the negative agenda here doesn't want people feeling love and feeling happy. Because, of course, if you're not in a state of love and happiness, then your heart chakra generally is closed. So if I speak to you, as we're speaking now, I speak to you with untruth and I lie to you, as soon as my words hit your energetic field, your heart chakra will close because your heart chakra will know the words and the frequency are negative because they're lies. If I speak to you with truth and integrity, your heart chakra will open and you will receive and assimilate the information into your field because it's spoken truthfully with a high vibration. So everything is vibrational based, basically.
Would you say that humanity will feel as though they're in a happier place a year from now than they are now?
I think there'll be some turbulence, really. Again, when we get back to the collective, so all of you are connected to each other. If everyone on the planet was to meditate at the same day to open your heart chakras, allow the frequency of love in, then this planet would change vibration overnight. And this, of course, is why there is so much strife and negativity and war, financial pressures, people feeling suicidal and negative to try and hold that vibration down.
Mm.
So, from our perspective, humanity, the group of you, must want change. Everyone needs to lock together to have change. You can't just have a few activists that are waving flags and basically signposting people. If the majority of the population are fast asleep and they're happily watching the football game or the baseball game and they're eating their ice cream and they think that they're living in happiness, If that's the majority of the population, then they hold the vibration down, whilst the activists and the people that are trying to raise the vibration are the minority. And this is the problem that we see from a spiritual perspective. It's how do you get the majority of the people to wake up, enter into a conscious state, and actually understand who and what they are, and just the thought change collectively on the planet will change the frequency of vibration. And as the frequency changes, therefore the negative agenda will have to leave. So it could happen overnight, but of course the negative agenda is very clever in the way they work, and they keep most people in this either lethargic or fearful state, thus keeping the vibration down.
Perhaps an outreach on a unprecedented scale might be a good idea to enfranchise millions into such a an effort.
And of course, this is what's required, really, James, is that we, from a spiritual perspective, do have our hands tied. We can only really engage with people like yourselves, people that are awake, people that are conscious, people that want change. We're not really allowed to, whilst we conform to universal law, to come into the conscious awareness of those people that aren't receptive. It wouldn't be right for us to do that. And that, of course, is what's been happening for decades now, is that most people are kept entertained by the negative agenda, and therefore they don't wake up enough to actually want change. And if you ask them to change, they probably would be happy with their situation. And this is, of course, the problem. Is how do you get people that are in a state of lethargy and acceptance to actually want something better? And until the collective wants something better and the vibration changes, then this negative layer still remains in control.
Hmm. Free will. The subject I
Yeah,
was talking to Andy. This subject holds my interest a lot these last few years. It fascinates me.
yes, and free will must be respected because you are a species, you have free will, and it would be right to embrace the free will because that's the only thing really that you as a human species have that's probably different to many other species and entities on different planets is on planet Earth. It's almost like the Wild West to a certain degree. You've got all of these people playing different roles in theatre. There are lots of entities here, both positive and negative, working against each other. But of course, the actual negative agenda has had control right back before Roman days. So this controlling vibration is firmly rooted. And obviously removing those roots and taking that tree down is quite a feat to have to happen from your species perspective.
Hmm. Well, would you honor me? Would you care to take a look at my soul and tell me what you see and what might be of my highest good? Because I'd very much like to be of service at this time.
Yes, of course. So again, if we look at your vibration, so I can see from your auric field there are certain perforations that have been there. So again, probably past traumas that you've been through, and just about every human being will have been through some type of trauma in their life. So we do expect to see perforations. We don't actually, I don't see any entities in your field. So there is no negative attachment entity control, which of course is a good thing. There is an elderly gentleman connected to you. So we would call this a discarnate spirit, basically, and he is outside of your field and has been with you for quite a long time, I would say. So were you able to perceive that there was this spiritual attachment, I guess, would be the right terminology from your perspective in your field?
No, would it be my father?
He's not given me a name per se, and he doesn't look like a father figure from that perspective. So I would probably say not. So communicating with your own spirit guide, he's saying that this person was involved in a motorbike accident and died on the roadside, and you then passed, and this person then basically connected to you at that point. So would you be able to understand that concept? It might be, of course,
Yes,
something to think about.
it was a very long time ago.
Right, okay. So this person that we see, or we've identified in your field, has been with you from that accident. So did you actually see someone dying on the roadside?
Not that I remember, no. Oh, yes. Yes.
So were you actually involved in the accident yourself, or were you either,
No,
well,
I came upon the scene and it was simply there wasn't blood or anything. It was just simply the amount of distance that he traveled and the sudden stop.
so this was a person on a motor vehicle, motorbike?
Yes.
Okay. And as you passed, I'm assuming you probably slowed down and observed the accident from that perspective.
I had empathy for the situation and I don't remember it being of much consequence in terms of my taking on anything at that time.
No, okay. So what your guide is saying to me is that after that, you started to feel quite emotional, and there's been quite a lot of emotion when you see people going through pain. You feel what we would term as unexplained emotion, because of course this person that's connected to your field obviously went through pain during the death process or the dying process.
Hmm.
That's been obviously transferred and picked up by you. So, just again, thinking about yourself and your empathy, you were talking at the start of the conversation about your level of empathy. Would you be able to potentially tie that into that time of that accident that you became more empathic? And if you could, it would be because this energy has been connected to your field, and obviously those feelings have been amplified by this attachment effectively.
The amplification of what I regard as my empathy seems to have been magnified more in more recent years than that. And is there a guide that you think would be the most appropriate? Who is my primary guide at this time?
So, the guide that I'm conversing with at the moment is an Indian guide. So I'm seeing an Indian with a hairdo, very big chest, carrying a very big spear, part of the Sioux tribe. And he's saying that he comes to you and has presented to you many times in your dream state. And there is also a past life connection to this particular figure.
Is he of benevolent intent?
He's a positive guide for sure.
Would it be uh, would it be good for me to connect with him further? And is that
Yes, it's
going to
something
happen?
you do in meditation. You can certainly try to connect to his energy. He's saying that he speaks to you in your dream state primarily, and you wake up with inspired thought, and that inspired thought is coming from him primarily.
Mm. So what would you say would be my highest good in this next chapter of my life here?
I think for all humans, if you think about your life, that there are two paths really that everyone walks to a certain degree. There is your own personal learning and development path. So some people arrive on a spiritual path and some people never do. So again, some people live their life, they watch the TV, they go to work, they try to exist as best they can, and then they pass. Other people find they're walking that physical path, material path, really, when they're younger, and then something happens in their life generally that diverts them onto a spiritual path. And you effectively have woken up, and as part of your awakening, you have a very deep seated inclination now to forge change as part of your own legacy, really, to a certain degree. And the fact that you now understand what we term as truth and integrity. You understand that most people don't speak their truth, most people don't have integrity, and most people don't work with integrity. So, that is, from my perspective, your vibration is screaming that that is your passion.
Mm. Well, I thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to share in terms of what might be a good path for me to pursue?
Yeah,
Yeah, something along
yes.
those lines.
Of course. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move this dear fellow that's connected to you, that's obviously been with you for a long, long time. So I'm going to open a doorway for him to come over to my side of the fence to move back to spirit. And obviously you may feel that happen. You may notice that the room goes quite cold from your physical perspective as we basically transition this spiritual energy out of that space. really from your path. So everything for you now, with my understanding, talking to your own guide, is about truth and integrity. This is the key feature of your life. And this is what you're living by. You're living by you're speaking your truth and you're living with integrity. And that is the key component of who you are and what you are. And obviously, the fact that you have a media, a broadcast appetite means that when you speak, people will listen. And obviously, we're here to discuss these things today and talk to you today. And you will become very popular in your own right because you're walking the path of truth and integrity. And this is what I'll be quite keen to encourage you to do is to stay on that path. So when you speak to people, when you interview people, the things that you do, try to stay on that path of truth and integrity because
Mm,
it's a vibration. Everything is a vibration. And when people stray away from truth and integrity, they compromise themselves, of course, in different ways. So trying to be true to yourself, self, and speak your truth and do so with integrity is actually more difficult than it would seem because it sounds like it should be easy, but there aren't many humans that can walk that path. And this, my friend, is what you've set yourself to do.
mm. Well, thank you. And I've been very much enriched by our encounter today, both you and Andy, and a lot of gratitude. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
But we're glad to be of
Visit
service.
anytime.
Yes, I shall. And of course, I've been as excited to make your acquaintance, all of you in the physical. As you said earlier, my friend, you don't know what and who you are. You look in the mirror and you see a person that's looking back that may be old. You may have, you may not be the right size. You may be a different shape. Most people don't really like and embrace themselves. But what you must remember is that's your theatre, that's your costume. Underneath, you have a vibration, you have a light. And that light, if you shine it bright, changes people, it changes the path, and it changes the planet. And this is what we want to try to get you to understand. It's your light that we need to make brighter. And that happens when you speak with truth and integrity and do the right things. So you must carry on, my friend, and I will watch your progress with much interest.
Mm, thank you so much for that. Thank you. Thank you.
I will say good day and bring young Andrew back, and we will obviously watch the rest of the podcast.
Mm, thank
Good
you.
day to you.
And to you.
Oh, I
Business
get,
as usual, Andy?
yeah, I'm back. You're
Well,
smiling. That's good.
as I
So,
shared with Chen, it was very enriching for me, and I'm very, very grateful for our meeting today. And you're a wonderful man. It's noteworthy to me that your soul must be of so much empathy, but you have this wonderful kind of detached decorum about you. Is there an effort to kind of the kind of term I like to use is not get any on you? Do you find is it a acquired knack to protect yourself, and can you extend that to perhaps an ability that many of us should take on?
yeah, I guess it's not really. I mean, well, I guess it's acquired kind of naturally, really. So I don't really try to. I just try to be who I am, and some people like me, some people don't. I don't really care if they don't particularly. So I don't. I do have. Jane will tell you that I do have a personality that doesn't really. I'm not very easy to control at all, particularly, but I also don't generally care because I'm just going to be me. And, I think that's kind of one of the attributes that I guess I've started to notice is actually quite good. I used to think it was a bad thing, but really, like you're saying, trying to stay detached from people's emotional state and that kind of thing is quite good. So one of the things, because I obviously teach like a spiritual protection course, and one of the things we talk about on there is one of the ways that I used to learn to detach myself and protect myself from other people's emotions. Started to go to quite a few funerals. So I wasn't like a serial funeral goer where I just turn up at anyone's funeral. But when there were family funerals, obviously I would turn up. But I would kind of see myself in a bubble of light and try and protect myself. And I thought, if I can get to the point that I can sit in a funeral and not feel everyone else's emotional state and not cry
Mm,
and be negative, then I know that I'm learning to keep myself in my protected bubble. And as you said, empathic people generally are very sensitive to everyone else's energy. So over the years, I've sort of learnt to kind of adapt my own protection to a point that I don't really get affected by other people at all, which, is quite good. And that means, of course, people can't trigger you either. So people can say anything they want really to me. I don't really care particularly. And I certainly don't think about it when I go to bed. So again, I don't really have many triggers that can kind of be pushed particularly. Not to say that I'm
Oh, I
perfect,
would say you're way past that. But
not.
a funeral would be a good place to practice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I say that on my course, of course, and people say, "Oh, yeah, there are funerals that we could go to kind of practice these techniques and learn to protect your energy from other people."
Well, I am very grateful for your taking the time today, and I feel very blessed and enriched by this conversation. I would like to be involved in your effort and learn in that regard. What do you think would be the next course? What would be an appropriate course for me to take? And would you briefly outline the kinds of courses that you offer and how people can reach you and look at? You have a wonderful website and some great short YouTubes on what is it, 6 or 8 different aspects of your work. If you could kind of go there for us, and then I'll thank you, and we'll close in the interest of your time.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, James. I think really from my perspective, we obviously teach psychic protection, spiritual protection, really. It's one of the things that obviously I'm the most passionate about because I kind of realize that if more people understand how to protect themselves spiritually, then that kind of enriches us all really as a kind of collective society to a certain degree. So I kind of run like a 6 week course that takes generally people through the concepts of meditation, how to start to meditate, how to learn to protect yourself, how to connect with your spirit guides, how to engage spiritual protection from other entities that are with us all the time. So we kind of go through that in 6 weeks, which is, it's quite fun. I enjoy teaching it. I quite like it. I like to see people that start off not knowing very much, and then in 6 weeks' time, they understand sovereignty and free will,
And
which
it's
are
a
very.
Zoom format, is it?
Yeah, so we do that online. It's Zoom format basically. So again, and we kind of record. I record the sessions so people that can't make it for 1 week or 2 weeks can obviously download the recordings and then watch them again. So that's kind of a good place to start, just to kind of learn about your own spiritual protection. I mean, I call it a spiritual development and protection course because, of course, lots of the conversation that we have over those 6 weeks changes you. It will change how you think. It changes how you perceive things. It will change the way you do things. And of course, people start to think differently. And that means when you start to think differently, your vibration changes, and then things around you change. So your family, your friends, your work colleagues, people start to notice that you're talking in a different way and you're seeing things in a different way. And we start to put boundaries up. We all need boundaries to keep people back out of our field and out of our space. So we talk a lot about boundaries and we cover lots of clearing in meditations. So we do past life meditations, we do kind of future meditation, current meditation. We're invoking the guides to work with us and clear our field. So it's kind of quite a rich 6 weeks, really. I probably could run it over like 6 months and make it easier, but it's a bit of an intensive kind of
I'll
two
take it.
hours every
I'll
week,
take it.
which is
And if
good.
somebody of more organized thought would have brought this up in the body of our conversation earlier, but I did hire you to do a clearing on my wife, and we were together for 30 something years. And although our relationship didn't have all of the components that a lot of men like, we were kind of akin to like maybe somebody close that you would travel with. And the glue that held us together was lifting people up, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. And she was bipolar and she got off of her meds quickly, which in and of itself is a nightmare, as you know. And it happened once before. I alluded to that, and I did a kind of an intuitive kind of brand of exorcism. And when she got off of her meds, she had to make a choice between her mental health and her kidney health, and she decided. And the entity moved in. And oh my goodness, we're talking about a woman. I don't even, perhaps another time, but what the profound change is very much what you describe in your videos with the just unbelievable. She would enfranchise both people she knows and strangers into her life and then repel them. And it's like watching a car accident in slow motion. And I prayed and I hired you and I tried as hard as I could to bring as much love to it as I could and affect positive change. Couldn't do
Yeah, it's very difficult. And I think it's that thing, James, as well, isn't it? When it's someone you know and love, it's so much more difficult to do the work. When we do the work or when I do the work, I'm working remotely. I don't know the people. I never get to see the clients ever, generally. So it is a very kind of remote way to work. But it means, of course, you can be very consciously disconnected from the outcome. So we just run through the procedure. I connect to Chen. He comes in to the client's field and clears and removes what he finds there, and that's happening very quickly. And of course, that is effectively the reason why this work is so powerful, because we're working with spiritual entities that are doing the work. I don't do the work, and you are invoking that entity. So when you were trying to do that yourself, it's a very difficult thing to be able to do because you're emotionally connected with that person to start with, which makes it even more difficult. And then, of course, you're trying to perform an exorcism of an entity that's got control of that person's etheric field, that's in their field, that's part of their energy and vibration. And that's really difficult to push them out without spiritual helpers on the other side that kind of working for you, really.
Yes. And well, what I wanted to bring up is that the profound, I mean, what a dark experience in a verbal or a tech exchange or a text exchange or a phone call with her. Oh my goodness, a completely different person. But she spoke with me and interacted and texted with me in a manner that she hadn't in a year after your work. However, I hate to say it, but in a short period of time, perhaps 24 hours, the entity moved back in. And I might understand that an effort has to be made to fill the void with light. Otherwise, that happens. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big problems with this type of work, really. So when someone has entities that are controlling them that are in their field, they've normally done a lot of substance, so the etheric field is perforated and quite broken. So when the spirit guides Chen and his team come in and remove the entities and detach discarnate spirits, clear cursed energy, that type of thing, there's obviously a massive change that happens to someone's etheric field. But of course, the holes are still there for a period of time. And this is where this aftercare kind of conversation comes in. That generally, if the person can start to use their own kind of intuition and spiritual help to protect their field, to meditate, to see themselves inside a bubble of light, sprinkle sea salt around the house, to actually employ some spiritual protection techniques whilst that field reforms, that keeps things back. But of course, if people don't do that, then effectively you've still got these holes and perforations, which then makes you vulnerable to other energies because the entity that was there before would have been cleared and removed, and they don't come back because they're kind of removed from this vibratory frequency or dimension. So the spirit guides take them out of Earth effectively, so they can't come back. But of course, there's always more entities that are sat waiting to kind of jump in next, and
But
that
the
is really.
but it always seems to circle back to that free will thing. She has bipolar, so as you know, the one of the few traits of a bipolar person is illusions of grandeur. They think they got it going on. They think they're the bomb. you know. So she
Yeah.
wasn't receptive after I don't think. Maybe I think that's part of the
It's,
dynamic
yeah,
here.
of course, the other thing is like when we go to bed and we go to, in the dream state, these entities can present again in the dream state as something positive. And again, people give their free will away and agree to these things connecting to them, and then you're back to square one. So it kind of, is part of a cycle for some people. And like you say, people that have got some of these kind of medical conditions like bipolar and some of these things, schizophrenia, some people can kind of have things cleared and just go back to normal almost straight away next day. Other people feel fine for, as you said, 24 hours, a few weeks, and then find themselves being pulled back into that dark place. It depends what they do, how they do things, and of course, medication really is quite a big problem. So the way that I see medication, recreational drugs break and perforate the etheric field. So fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, all those things aren't particularly good for your spiritual protection. But of course, neither are a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs because they're still chemical-based drugs that still break the etheric field and cause perforations. So even though they,
Pharmakia, spirits. Interesting that alcohol is called spiritum.
yeah, right. So, so this again is, is part of the problem. And sometimes it does take, a few times to try and educate people that if you want to be sovereign and be back in control of yourself and obviously close yourself down and protect yourself, there are certain things that you do need to change and do to kind of obtain that level of integrity.
Well, I'd like to learn more. It's in a happy time of my life, in part because I can see our new world unfolding and very excited about that. But my little thing is I kind of like to leave everybody better than I found them. And despite my efforts, I just couldn't do it with her. And after that many years, it's tough. But I'm gonna give it another go.
Yeah, it's probably part
I'm
of
gonna,
your path, James, isn't it? Because we all need like a goal, really. Everyone needs to have some reason to wake up in the morning and some reason to do this type of work. And if we look at most of the people that were training to be sort of spirit release practitioners, all of them come from some trauma or abuse, basically. And they've all been in a dark place, they've all been through difficult times and things. And then generally, most people have had a spiritual clearing, remote spirit release session, and then feel the difference and feel the change. And then,
mm,
of course, they want to do the same for the people they love and the people they connect with. And
mm,
that's what's kind of like percolating this work, really.
mm,
And we're trying to get to a point that we kind of get to a point that we start to engage with the medical field and say, look, for some conditions, there is a spiritual source of a problem. And that spiritual source of problem is the problem. And when we clear it and remove it, that person obviously moves back into a sovereign state, changes their life. So we're trying to get to a point that we as an academy, can present our data sets to the medical profession and actually start to engage in conversations and try and find a way forward so that we can help people that have got extreme mental health problems.
Well, I think the music, the concert that's going to be playing is going to be very receptive to your jam, Andy, and I'm very appreciative. You have a wonderful, comprehensive website that includes different facets of your work, also how to contact you, and also information about the different courses that you offer, of which I will be taking the first one that you recommended. If you could just close on that and any other uh, closing message that you would like to share, that would be
Yeah,
great.
sure. So our website is andy-porter.co.uk, or you can just go to Google, type in Andy Porter, psychic surgeon, or Andy Porter and Chen, and I kind of pop up on YouTube, Facebook, and we've got quite a few channels that we're trying to kind of talk to people, engage with people, basically. And so Chen, my spirit guide, has his own Facebook page. So a while back, he wanted to get messages out to people kind of through me. And obviously, I had my Facebook page, which is called Andrew Surgeon, and he wanted to give different messages than I was giving, basically. So we kind of set him up with his own kind of Facebook.
Probably a good Facebook page. He doesn't show what he had for dinner and all that kind of stuff, though, right?
No, it's just kind of spiritual development, conversations, memes, and things. But he's a bit of a character, really, because I use Midjourney as an AI tool to create images. So I was using Midjourney years ago, and he said, I want a picture of me, basically. So I was typing in all this text. He got me to write this text into Midjourney, and this picture popped up of this Chinese guy, and he said, that's me. That's how I look. That's how I present. I want that image. So I kind of saved this, basically. Now when I create images, I use this core image as the main focus one that then we build the pictures of. So you've got all these pictures of Chen in different kind of timelines in his life when he was younger, when he's older, and obviously then the wordings that go with his kind of narrative and teachings and things, really.
Is that
So,
link on your website, Andy?
yeah, it's on the website. Yeah, I can pop it
Oh,
through to you.
good.
Yeah, so we have some interesting things, some interesting conversations. And I obviously
Yeah.
channel. So I develop a picture which is developed by him basically, and then he gives me the wording to write with the image for that kind of meme that goes out. So we covered lots of things on that from that
Mm,
perspective.
mm.
Good. But I can obviously drop you some links to the Facebook pages and that kind of thing, and obviously YouTube. So if people want to find me, I'm generally quite easy to find. And
Well,
obviously,
your website is so extensive and so good that that will serve in and of itself. And I'm very grateful, Andy, and I'm glad that you're out there in our world. And thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
So thank you. I mean, obviously, thank you for the work you're doing because we're all here just doing our thing, aren't we? We've all got different things that we can offer and we're all doing different things. And, individually, we don't really make much change, but together we obviously can make pretty instrumental change. And I think this timeline on this planet, now is the time we need to kind of wake people up and get this change happening, really. And hence, that's what your podcast is called.
Yes.
Wake You up. So
Well,
it's kind
once
of,
I take your course and I have a little bit more to bring to it, I'd be honored if you'd come on with me again.
yeah, definitely we can do that for sure.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you,
Right,
Andy.
well, you take care. Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, thank you. And
Okay.
I'll be in touch.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye now.